Ambassador Marcus Reed had attended 17 different royal ceremonies across 12 star systems during his diplomatic career, but nothing had prepared him for the coronation of Princess Lyralii on Zephyr Prime. The Crystal Palace rose around them like a cathedral built from living light, its walls seeming to pulse with the collective heartbeat of the thousands of beings gathered to witness this historic moment. "Remarkable architecture," Dr. Sarah Chen whispered beside him as they took their designated seats in the human diplomatic section. "The entire structure appears to be grown rather than constructed." Marcus nodded absently, his attention focused on the ceremony unfolding before them. Representatives from dozens of species filled the vast amphitheater, their varied forms creating a tapestry of galactic civilization that spoke to the Zephyrian Empire's influence across known space. But even among such diversity, the central figure commanded absolute attention. Princess Lyralii moved through the ancient rituals with a grace that seemed to defy the formal constraints of ceremony. Nearly 7 feet tall, her iridescent silver skin caught and reflected the palace's ambient light in patterns that shifted between colors like liquid moonlight. The elaborate crown ridges that marked her royal lineage were adorned with crystalline formations that seemed to respond to her bioelectric field, creating subtle harmonics that resonated through the palace structure itself. "The crown of stars," Dr. Chen murmured, consulting her diplomatic briefing materials. "Legend says it was crafted from the remnants of Zephyr's first moon, destroyed in an ancient war. Only those of pure royal bloodline can activate its crystalline matrix." Marcus watched as Princess Lyralii approached the altar where the legendary crown waited, its faceted surface dark and inert until she drew near. The moment her fingers touched the artifact, cascades of light erupted from its core, creating patterns of such beauty that several delegates audibly gasped in appreciation. But what impressed Marcus most wasn't the spectacular display of ancient technology, it was the way Princess Lyralii handled the enormous pressure of the moment. As challenges were formally issued by various noble houses, testing her knowledge of law, history, and military strategy, she responded with intelligence and composure that demonstrated both extensive preparation and natural leadership ability. "She's formidable," Dr. Chen observed as Princess Lyralii fielded a particularly complex question about interstellar trade law. "Her grasp of galactic economics is extraordinary." "More than formidable," Marcus replied, watching as the princess seamlessly transitioned from legal discourse to a demonstration of traditional Zephyrian energy manipulation that caused the palace walls themselves to sing in harmonic resonance. "Look at how she's integrating ancient tradition with practical governance. She's not just performing a ceremony, she's showing everyone that she understands both the symbolic and functional aspects of leadership." The ceremony reached its climax as Princess Lyralii lifted the crown of stars and placed it upon her own head, a gesture that tradition demanded she perform without assistance. The moment the crown settled into place, the entire palace erupted in light as every crystalline surface responded to her presence, creating a symphony of color and sound that seemed to celebrate not just her coronation but the very concept of enlightened leadership. It was then, as Princess Lyralii stood bathed in cascading light with the authority of an empire settling around her like a mantle, that Marcus felt compelled to voice his genuine admiration. "She's the most magnificent princess I've seen," he whispered to Dr. Chen, his words carrying the kind of spontaneous appreciation that came from witnessing something truly extraordinary. The Crystal Palace's acoustic properties were designed to carry sound in precise patterns, allowing even whispered conversations to reach specific locations with crystal clarity. Marcus had forgotten this architectural feature in his moment of genuine admiration, and he realized his mistake the instant Princess Lyralii's acceptance speech paused mid-sentence. Across the vast ceremonial space, her luminous eyes turned with precise accuracy toward the human diplomatic section. The silence stretched for several heartbeats as her gaze found his, and Marcus felt the weight of her attention like a physical force. Princess Lyralii's expression shifted subtly but unmistakably, surprise, curiosity, and something that might have been recognition passing across her features before she resumed her speech with perfect royal composure. But Marcus noticed that her words now carried a different quality, as if his unintended compliment had somehow changed the tone of everything that followed. "Did she just?" Dr. Chen began. "Yes," Marcus confirmed quietly, feeling heat rise in his cheeks as he realized that his private observation had somehow become a very public declaration. She heard me. Marcus, do you realize what you've just done? He was beginning to. Around them, other delegates had noticed Princess Lyraliai's momentary attention to the human section, and the kind of subtle but significant shift in protocol that could have enormous diplomatic implications. Zephyrian nobles were exchanging glances, their expressions suggesting that their newly crowned heir apparent showing interest in any particular diplomatic mission was unprecedented. The coronation ceremony is supposed to treat all foreign delegations with identical courtesy, Dr. Chen whispered urgently. Personal attention from the princess could be interpreted as favoritism, preference, or political alliance. Or, Marcus said, watching as Princess Lyraliai continued her speech while occasionally glancing in his direction, it could be interpreted as genuine appreciation for honest admiration. That's a very optimistic reading of the situation. That's the only reading that doesn't assume I've just created a diplomatic disaster. As the ceremony concluded with Princess Lyraliai accepting the formal oaths of loyalty from her nobles and the congratulations of foreign dignitaries, Marcus found himself in the unusual position of having said exactly what he meant while creating complications he hadn't intended. But looking at Princess Lyraliai as she moved through the final rituals, the way she carried herself with strength tempered by wisdom, the obvious intelligence behind every response, the grace with which she handled responsibilities that would crush most beings, Marcus realized he wouldn't take back his words even if he could. She truly was magnificent, and if saying so had changed something between them, perhaps that change was worth whatever complications might follow. The question was whether Princess Lyraliai agreed with that assessment, and whether a spontaneous compliment from a human diplomat could become the foundation for something more significant than either of them had planned. As the newly crowned heir apparent completed her coronation and turned one final time toward the human diplomatic section, her expression suggested that Marcus would soon find out. The reception following Princess Lyraliai's coronation was held in the palace's Garden of Eternal Stars, where bioluminescent plants from across the galaxy created a living constellation that rivaled the night sky above. Marcus moved through the gathering with the careful attention to protocol that diplomatic training demanded, but his mind remained focused on the moment when Princess Lyraliai had turned toward him during her acceptance speech. "Ambassador Reed," came a familiar voice behind him. He turned to find Ambassador Catherine Stevens, head of the human diplomatic mission, approaching with the kind of expression that suggested both opportunity and concern. "We need to discuss what happened during the ceremony." "Yes, ma'am. I realize my comment was inappropriate." "Your comment," Ambassador Stevens interrupted, "has created what might be the most significant development in human-Zephyrian relations since first contact." Marcus felt a chill of apprehension. "Ma'am. Princess Lyraliai has specifically requested information about our delegation. Not the standard diplomatic briefing that royal protocol typically requires, but detailed background information about you personally." "About me?" "Your educational background, your diplomatic experience, your cultural specializations, even your personal interests and hobbies. That level of inquiry is unprecedented in Zephyrian royal protocol." Dr. Chen, who had been listening from nearby, moved closer to their conversation. "Ambassador Stevens, what are the implications of royal interest in a specific diplomatic representative?" "Unknown, which is what makes this either a tremendous opportunity or a potential disaster." Ambassador Stevens gestured toward where Princess Lyraliai stood surrounded by a carefully choreographed receiving line of dignitaries. Zephyrian royalty traditionally treats all foreign missions with identical formal courtesy. Personal attention suggests either political favoritism or genuine curiosity, both of which could affect our negotiating position. Marcus watched Princess Lyraliai as she gracefully received congratulations from a seemingly endless stream of alien dignitaries, noting how she maintained perfect composure while clearly managing multiple conversations and political calculations simultaneously. "What kind of information did she request?" he asked. "Everything. Your academic work on comparative cultural psychology, your previous diplomatic assignments, your publications on interspecies communication theory." Ambassador Stevens paused meaningfully. "She also asked about your personal philosophy regarding leadership and governance." That's very specific. That's very personal. Marcus, in 40 years of diplomatic service, I've never seen a newly crowned royal heir show this level of interest in an individual representative from a foreign power. What does that mean for our mission? It means, came a new voice, that you have an opportunity to advance human-Zephyrian relations in ways that formal negotiations alone cannot achieve. They turned to see Lord Veltaran, one of Princess Lyraliai's senior advisors, approaching with the fluid grace that marked all Zephyrian nobility. His appearance at their conversation was itself significant. Advisors to royal family members rarely initiated contact with foreign diplomats during public events. Lord Veltaran, Ambassador Stevens said with careful diplomacy, "An honor to meet you." "The honor is mine, Ambassador Stevens." "And you must be Ambassador Reed," he continued, focusing his attention on Marcus with obvious interest. "Her Imperial Highness has requested that I extend a personal invitation for you to attend a private audience tomorrow afternoon." The silence that followed was filled with implications that everyone present understood. Private audiences between Zephyrian royalty and foreign diplomats were diplomatic events of enormous significance, typically reserved for heads of state or representatives of the most crucial negotiations. "May I ask the purpose of this audience?" Ambassador Stevens inquired carefully. "Her Imperial Highness wishes to discuss comparative perspectives on leadership philosophy and cultural governance models." Lord Veltaran's expression suggested he was delivering carefully prepared diplomatic language. "She believes that Ambassador Reed's academic background in cultural psychology could provide valuable insights for her upcoming domestic policy initiatives." "Of course," Marcus said, understanding that refusing such an invitation was not really an option. "I would be honored to assist Her Imperial Highness in any way possible." "Excellent. The audience is scheduled for tomorrow at the third bell, in Her Imperial Highness's private study. Formal diplomatic attire will be appropriate." After Lord Veltaran departed, Ambassador Stevens turned to Marcus with an expression that mixed excitement with apprehension. "Do you understand what just happened?" "I think so. My comment during the ceremony somehow caught Princess Lyraliai's attention, and now I have a private audience with the heir to the Zephyrian throne. You have an opportunity to establish personal rapport with one of the most powerful individuals in the galaxy. If handled correctly, this could advance human interests in ways that years of formal negotiations couldn't achieve. And if handled incorrectly, it could set back human-Zephyrian relations for decades." Dr. Chen looked concerned. "Marcus, are you prepared for this level of diplomatic responsibility?" "I'm prepared to be honest and respectful. Beyond that, I'll have to trust that Princess Lyraliai's interest is genuine rather than some kind of political test." "What makes you think it's genuine?" Marcus thought about the moment during the ceremony when Princess Lyraliai had turned toward him, the surprise in her expression, the curiosity that had replaced formal authority, the way she had continued to glance in his direction throughout the remaining rituals. "Because when I called her magnificent, I meant it. And I think she recognized that the compliment was sincere rather than calculated." "You're basing the future of human-Zephyrian diplomacy on a spontaneous comment and a look across a crowded coronation ceremony?" "I'm basing it on the belief that authentic appreciation for someone's capabilities and character transcends species boundaries and political calculations." Ambassador Stevens studied his face with the kind of attention that career diplomats reserve for crucial assessments. "Marcus, you realize that tomorrow's audience could either establish you as one of the most important cultural bridges between our species, or end your diplomatic career in spectacular fashion." "Yes, ma'am. I understand the stakes." "And you're willing to proceed?" Marcus looked across the reception toward where Princess Lyraliai continued her formal duties, noting the intelligence behind every interaction, the strength that carried her through what must be an exhausting evening, and the grace with which she handled responsibilities that affected billions of beings across dozens of worlds. "Ma'am, I told the truth about what I saw in Princess Lyraliai, someone remarkable enough to earn genuine admiration. Tomorrow, I'll continue telling the truth about my respect for her capabilities and my interest in learning from her perspectives. Even if that truth creates complications for both of you. Especially if it creates complications." Because the alternative is pretending that my admiration was diplomatic flattery rather than honest appreciation, and I don't think Princess Lyralii would respect that kind of deception. Dr. Chen smiled despite her obvious concerns. Marcus, you're either about to achieve something unprecedented in interspecies diplomacy, or you're about to discover that honesty isn't always the best diplomatic policy. Either way, Marcus replied, at least I'll know I approached the situation with integrity. As the reception continued around them, Marcus found himself both anticipating and dreading tomorrow's audience. He had told the truth about Princess Lyralii's magnificence, and that truth had somehow resonated with her strongly enough to create this unprecedented opportunity. The question was whether he could build on that foundation to create something meaningful for both their peoples, or whether he had simply been fortunate enough to say the right thing at the right moment without any deeper significance. Tomorrow, he would find out which interpretation was correct, and whether a spontaneous compliment could become the foundation for diplomatic breakthrough or personal disaster. But looking at Princess Lyralii as she moved through her royal duties with obvious competence and quiet strength, Marcus remained convinced that calling her magnificent had been exactly the right thing to do, regardless of the complications that might follow. Princess Lyralii's private study was nothing like Marcus had expected. Instead of the formal grandeur that characterized the palace's public spaces, her personal chambers revealed someone who valued intellectual curiosity over ceremonial display. Shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with books, data crystals, and artifacts from dozens of worlds. Art from various cultures created a gallery that spoke to broad interests and genuine appreciation for diverse perspectives. Ambassador Reed, Princess Lyralii said as he entered, rising from a desk where she had been reviewing what appeared to be policy documents. Thank you for accepting my invitation. She had changed from her ceremonial robes into simpler attire that somehow made her natural luminescence more apparent rather than less. Without the formal regalia of office, she seemed more approachable while paradoxically appearing more impressive. Intelligence and strength of character that needed no external symbols to command respect. Your Imperial Highness, the honor is entirely mine, Marcus replied, offering the formal bow that protocol required. Please, be seated, she said, gesturing toward comfortable chairs arranged near a window that offered spectacular views of the capital city. I hope you won't mind if I dispense with some of the more elaborate protocol. I find that genuine conversation requires a certain degree of informality. Whatever your Imperial Highness prefers. Princess Lyralii settled into her chair with the fluid grace that marked all her movements, but Marcus noticed something in her posture that suggested careful consideration of how to begin a conversation that clearly mattered to her. Ambassador Reed, I must admit that your comment during yesterday's ceremony caught me quite off guard. Your Imperial Highness, I sincerely apologize if my words were inappropriate. They were spoken spontaneously, without consideration for proper protocol. They were honest, she interrupted gently. That's what made them remarkable. Marcus paused, uncertain how to respond to what seemed like appreciation rather than criticism. Your Imperial Highness. When you called me magnificent, you weren't attempting to curry favor or establish political advantage. You were expressing genuine admiration for what you observed during the ceremony. She leaned forward slightly, her luminous eyes focused on his face with obvious interest. That kind of honesty is rare in my experience. I imagine that your position makes it difficult to know when people are being sincere. Extraordinarily difficult. Most interactions I have are filtered through layers of political calculation, personal ambition, or simple fear of offending royal sensibilities. People tell me what they think I want to hear, or what they believe will advance their own interests. That must be isolating. Profoundly so. Which is why your spontaneous comment was so intriguing. You saw something in the ceremony, in me, that prompted genuine appreciation rather than diplomatic flattery. Marcus considered his response carefully, recognizing that this conversation was moving beyond formal diplomacy into more personal territory. Your Imperial Highness, what I saw was someone handling enormous responsibility with intelligence, grace, and obvious strength of character. The coronation demonstrated not just your right to rule, but your capacity to lead wisely. That combination of capability and character is indeed magnificent. Princess Lyralii smiled, not the formal expression she had worn during public ceremonies, but something warmer and more genuine. You see leadership as a combination of capability and character. I see leadership as service that requires both intellectual competence and moral courage. Technical skills can be learned, but character is something more fundamental. And you believe I demonstrated both during the coronation? I believe you demonstrated qualities that would make any civilization fortunate to have you as their leader. Princess Lyralii was quiet for several moments, studying his face with the kind of attention that suggested she was evaluating not just his words but his motivations for speaking them. Ambassador Reed, may I ask you something personal? Of course, Your Imperial Highness. In your diplomatic career, how often have you encountered leaders who you genuinely respected rather than simply tolerated for political necessity? The question was more pointed than Marcus had expected, but he recognized its importance and chose to answer honestly. Rarely, Your Imperial Highness. Most political leaders I've worked with have been competent administrators or skilled negotiators, but very few have demonstrated the combination of intelligence, strength, and genuine care for their people's welfare that earns authentic respect. And yet you formed that impression of me based on a single ceremony. I formed that impression based on how you handled every aspect of that ceremony. The way you responded to challenges with both knowledge and wisdom. The way you integrated tradition with practical governance. The way you carried enormous responsibility without losing sight of what that responsibility serves. Which is the welfare of your people and the advancement of just governance. Leadership that improves lives rather than simply maintaining power. Princess Lyralii leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful and pleased. That's a remarkably sophisticated understanding of leadership philosophy for someone who observed me for a few hours during a formal ceremony. That's the result of years studying how different cultures approach governance and leadership. Your Imperial Highness, if I may say so, what impressed me most wasn't your technical competence, though that was obvious, but your apparent understanding that authority exists to serve rather than to be served. You could determine that from my responses to ceremonial challenges. I could determine that from the way you spoke about your responsibilities. Most rulers talk about their rights and privileges. You talked about your obligations and duties. And that's what prompted your comment about magnificence. Marcus realized that they had reached the heart of why Princess Lyralii had requested this audience. She wanted to understand not just what he had meant, but why his observation had affected her so strongly. Your Imperial Highness, magnificence isn't about beauty or power or impressive displays of ability. Magnificence is about the rare combination of capability and character that creates leaders worthy of the authority they wield. That's what I saw in you during the ceremony. And that's what you meant when you called me magnificent. That's exactly what I meant. Princess Lyralii stood and moved to the window, looking out at the city that now fell under her authority as heir apparent. Ambassador Reed, in 34 years of life, during which I have been trained, tested, educated, and evaluated by the finest minds in the Empire, no one has ever told me that I was magnificent because of my character rather than my abilities. That seems like an oversight on their part. It seems like the difference between being valued as a tool and being appreciated as a person. Marcus understood that they had moved far beyond diplomatic conversation into something approaching personal revelation. Princess Lyralii was sharing insights about her life and experiences that she probably rarely discussed with anyone. Your Imperial Highness, if I may, being appreciated as a person seems like a basic requirement for anyone in leadership. How can you serve others effectively if you don't understand what it means to be valued for who you are rather than what you can accomplish? Exactly the question I've been asking myself since yesterday. She turned back to face him. Marcus, may I call you Marcus? Your comment made me realize that I've spent my entire life being praised for my performance while being valued for my utility. You were the first person to express appreciation for what you saw as my essential character. Because your essential character is what makes your performance meaningful. Technical competence without moral foundation is just elaborate skill. What makes you magnificent is that your abilities serve something larger than yourself. Princess Lyralii returned to her chair, but her posture had relaxed into something less formal and more personal. I have a confession to make, Marcus. I requested this audience not just because your comment intrigued me, but because I wanted to understand if your admiration was based on genuine insight or fortunate guesswork. And what have you concluded? I've concluded that you see things that others miss, and that you're willing to speak honestly about what you observe even when it might create complications. Is that a good thing or a problematic thing? It's a rare thing. And rarity, in my experience, is usually valuable. As their conversation continued, Marcus realized that Princess Lyralii was not just intellectually impressive but genuinely interested in perspectives that challenged her assumptions and expanded her understanding. Their discussion ranged from leadership philosophy to cultural psychology to the practical challenges of governing diverse populations across vast distances. Marcus, she said eventually, I have a proposal for you. Your Imperial Highness. I would like you to serve as a cultural advisor during my transition to full authority. Your insights into comparative leadership approaches could be invaluable as I work to implement domestic reforms. I would be honored, Your Imperial Highness, but I should point out that such an arrangement would be unprecedented in human-Zephyrian relations. Which is exactly why it might be valuable. Unprecedented approaches to old problems sometimes produce better solutions than traditional methods. Marcus understood that accepting her proposal would change not just his career but potentially the entire relationship between their civilizations. Your Imperial Highness, may I ask why you're willing to take such a significant risk on someone you've known for less than 24 hours? Princess Lyralii smiled with the same genuine warmth she had shown when he first explained his comment about magnificence. Because yesterday, you saw something in me that was worth spontaneous admiration. Today, I see something in you that's worth considerable trust. Sometimes the most important decisions are the ones that feel right despite being impossible to justify through conventional logic. And this feels right. This feels like the beginning of something that could benefit both our peoples in ways we haven't yet imagined. Marcus looked at this remarkable woman who had somehow transformed a diplomatic audience into a conversation that might reshape the future of interspecies relations. Your Imperial Highness, if you're willing to trust your instincts about my character, then I'm willing to trust mine about yours. Then we have an agreement. We have an agreement. As Marcus prepared to leave, Princess Lyralii spoke once more. Marcus, thank you for seeing magnificence in me before I wore a crown. It made me remember that leadership is about who you are, not just what you can do. Thank you for showing me that calling someone magnificent can be the beginning of something magnificent itself. Walking back through the Crystal Palace, Marcus reflected on how completely his understanding of diplomatic possibility had changed. A spontaneous compliment had become a personal connection, which had become a professional partnership that could transform the relationship between two civilizations. And it all began with recognizing magnificence when he saw it. 6 months after Marcus had whispered his admiration during Princess Lyralii's coronation ceremony, he found himself standing in the same Crystal Palace, but everything had changed. What began as a spontaneous compliment had grown into a partnership that was reshaping both Zephyrian society and the future of interspecies cooperation. The education reforms are exceeding all projections, Princess Lyralii said, reviewing the latest data from across the empire. Her private study had become their regular meeting place, where formal protocol gave way to genuine collaboration. Your insights into human learning psychology have helped us create programs that honor Zephyrian tradition while embracing innovation. Marcus studied the reports showing improved literacy rates, increased scientific enrollment, and most importantly, growing citizen satisfaction with government responsiveness. The ideas were already sound. I just helped you present them in ways that connected with people who were ready for change but worried about losing their cultural identity. That's precisely the kind of perspective that makes our partnership so effective, Princess Lyralii replied, her luminous skin shifting to warmer tones as it always did when she was pleased. You help me see familiar challenges from entirely new angles. Their working relationship had evolved far beyond cultural consultation. Marcus had become Princess Lyraliai's most trusted advisor on domestic policy, helping her navigate the complex balance between modernization and tradition that effective reform required. More significantly, their collaboration had demonstrated that interspecies partnerships could produce results that neither side could achieve alone. "What's the status of the Economic Inclusion Initiative?" Marcus asked, noting the pleased expression that crossed Princess Lyraliai's features. "Ahead of schedule and under budget. The employment programs have reduced economic inequality by 23% in the pilot regions, and citizen engagement in local governance has increased dramatically. Because people feel like their voices matter in decisions that affect their lives. Because we've proven that effective leadership means serving people rather than simply ruling them." Princess Lyraliai moved to the window overlooking the capital city, where the visible results of their reforms had transformed the urban landscape. "Marcus, what we've accomplished together has changed how Zephyrians think about governance itself." "How so?" "Citizens are beginning to expect leaders who demonstrate character as well as competence. They want representatives who can explain their decisions, who welcome different perspectives, and who treat public service as exactly that, service." Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction at the progress they'd achieved, but also growing concern about the political backlash their success had generated. "And the Conservative Council's response?" Princess Lyraliai's expression grew more serious. "They're organizing formal opposition to what they call foreign contamination of Zephyrian policy. The criticism is becoming more personal and more pointed. Meaning they're targeting our partnership specifically. Meaning they're questioning whether my judgment has been compromised by inappropriate personal feelings." The accusation hit closer to home than Marcus was comfortable admitting. Over 6 months of working closely together, his respect for Princess Lyraliai's intelligence and character had deepened into genuine affection that went beyond professional admiration. He had come to care about her welfare, to value her friendship, and to appreciate the rare combination of strength and compassion that made her such an effective leader. "Are they right?" he asked quietly. Princess Lyraliai turned from the window to face him directly, her violet eyes holding the kind of honesty that had characterized all their important conversations. "My policy decisions are absolutely influenced by our relationship, Marcus. But not in the way they suggest." "How then?" "Working with you has taught me that the best decisions come from considering multiple perspectives, that character matters more than credentials in choosing advisors, and that effective leadership requires the courage to value truth over convenience. Those aren't uniquely human insights." "No, but they're insights I gained through our partnership. The opposition is correct that my approach to governance has changed since we began working together. They're wrong about that change being problematic." Before Marcus could respond, Lord Veltaran entered with the urgent bearing that indicated serious political developments. "Your Imperial Highness, the Conservative Council has formally requested a special assembly to discuss your fitness for succession." Princess Lyraliai's posture straightened into the regal bearing that appeared whenever she faced significant challenges. "On what specific grounds?" "Foreign influence on domestic policy and concerns about personal relationships affecting judgment in matters of state." Marcus felt the familiar chill of political crisis. "They're forcing a public confrontation. They're demanding that I choose between our partnership and my succession rights," Princess Lyraliai said grimly. "The Council believes they can present our collaboration as evidence of compromised leadership." "Perhaps I should resign before this escalates further," Marcus offered, though the thought of ending their partnership felt like abandoning something genuinely important. "Absolutely not." Princess Lyraliai's response was immediate and firm. "Marcus, what we've built together has demonstrably improved life for millions of Zephyrians. I'm not going to sacrifice effective governance to appease political opponents who prefer familiar problems to innovative solutions. But if your succession is threatened, then I'll defend my choice of advisors based on results rather than prejudices. The evidence speaks for itself." Lord Veltaran looked concerned. "Your Imperial Highness, direct confrontation with the Conservative Council could create a constitutional crisis. And allowing them to dictate policy based on species prejudice would set a precedent that undermines everything we're trying to accomplish. Marcus recognized this as a defining moment not just for their partnership but for the principles they had worked to establish. Princess Lyralii was choosing to defend their collaboration as a matter of effective governance rather than personal preference. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Help me prepare a presentation that demonstrates the measurable benefits of diverse perspectives in policy development. Not just our specific reforms, but evidence that inclusive decision-making produces better outcomes than traditional approaches." The Special Assembly convened 3 days later in the Grand Hall, with representatives from across the Zephyrian Empire gathered to witness what amounted to a formal challenge to Princess Lyralii's leadership philosophy. Marcus sat with other advisors and consultants, acutely aware that he was the primary focus of the proceedings. "Honored representatives," Princess Lyralii began, her voice carrying the authority that had impressed Marcus during her coronation ceremony, "you have requested this assembly to discuss concerns about foreign influence on policy development. I welcome this opportunity to demonstrate that diverse perspectives strengthen rather than weaken effective governance." What followed was a comprehensive presentation of their collaborative reforms, complete with detailed outcome analyses, citizen satisfaction surveys, and economic impact data. But Princess Lyralii went beyond defending specific policies to articulate a broader philosophy about leadership in a diverse galaxy. "The question before this assembly," she said, "is not whether human perspectives have influenced Zephyrian policy. They obviously have. The question is whether that influence has served our people's interests." The displays showed dramatic improvements in education, economic opportunity, and citizen engagement across all demographic categories. The evidence suggests that incorporating diverse viewpoints into policy development produces superior results compared to traditional methods. Ambassador Reed's insights haven't compromised Zephyrian governance, they've enhanced it. Conservative Council leader Thex Moran rose to respond, his formal robes and elaborate status markings emphasizing his position as defender of traditional values. "Your Imperial Highness, no one disputes the technical outcomes of your reforms. We question whether dependence on foreign advisors represents appropriate independence for Zephyrian leadership. Councillor Thex Moran, effective leadership requires the wisdom to seek good counsel regardless of its origin. Restricting advice to traditional sources limits both perspective and innovation. And what of concerns that personal feelings have affected your political judgment?" Princess Lyralii paused, and Marcus realized she was about to address the most personal aspect of the challenge directly. "Counselor, my working relationship with Ambassador Reed has indeed affected my judgment. It has taught me that character matters more than credentials, that diverse perspectives improve decision quality, and that the best advisors are those who challenge assumptions rather than confirming preferences. You admit to personal involvement that could compromise your objectivity? I admit to genuine respect and appreciation for someone whose insights have demonstrably improved our governance. If valuing character and competence constitutes inappropriate personal involvement, then every effective leader in history has been similarly compromised." The debate continued for hours, with various representatives questioning both the wisdom and the outcomes of Princess Lyralii's reform initiatives. But gradually, the weight of measurable evidence began to shift public opinion in her favor. "Your Imperial Highness," said Elder Kyarthana, a respected moderate voice, "the results you've presented are indeed impressive. But how do we ensure this collaborative approach remains focused on Zephyrian interests? Through the same mechanism we use for any policy framework, continued evaluation and adjustment based on results rather than ideology." When the final vote was taken, Princess Lyralii's position was upheld by a decisive majority, with the Assembly formally recognizing that diverse advisory perspectives served rather than threatened Zephyrian interests. After the proceedings concluded, Marcus joined Princess Lyralii in her private chambers, both exhausted but relieved by the outcome. "Thank you," he said simply, "for defending not just our partnership but the principles it represents." "Thank you for being worth defending," she replied with a smile that reminded him of their first private conversation. "Marcus, what happened today proved something crucial, that when we choose to value character over convention, people respond positively. Even when it requires political courage? Especially when it requires political courage. The greatest test of leadership isn't managing safe decisions, it's standing by principles when doing so demands personal risk. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the same crystal palace where he had first whispered his admiration, watching Princess Lyraliai's formal coronation as Empress. The ceremony emphasized collaborative governance and inclusive decision-making, the principles they had worked together to establish. Citizens of the Zephyrian Empire, Empress Lyraliai said in her coronation address, effective leadership requires the courage to seek wisdom wherever it can be found and the humility to value character over credentials in choosing advisors. As she spoke about unity, cooperation, and the strength that came from diverse perspectives, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since his spontaneous comment about her magnificence. To all who have shown me that true magnificence lies not in solitary strength, she concluded, looking directly at him, but in the wisdom to build partnerships that serve something greater than ourselves. Thank you for teaching me that leadership is about who we choose to become together. After the ceremony, as they reviewed the congratulations from across the galaxy, Empress Lyraliai smiled with the same warmth that had characterized their friendship from the beginning. Any regrets about that spontaneous comment you made at my succession ceremony? Only that it took me so long to recognize magnificence when I saw it. And now? Now I understand that magnificence isn't something you observe from a distance, it's something you help create through the courage to build meaningful partnerships. Empress Lyraliai nodded, looking out at the empire they would continue to serve together. Then we understand each other perfectly, Marcus. Because magnificence, to me, means having the wisdom to see worth in others and the courage to act on that recognition, regardless of what others might think. As they began planning the next phase of reforms that would benefit billions across both their civilizations, Marcus understood that his whispered admiration had indeed changed everything, not just between them personally, but in terms of what became possible when people chose to recognize and celebrate the magnificence in each other.